morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 5 and episode number 693 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025. Already halfway through July. I don't know how we got there so fast. And as you can tell by the sun shining on my face here, it's a beautiful day here at the Beaver Lodge yet again. We're in a bit of a heat wave here, though, and haven't got much rain over the last little bit, so we would definitely welcome some sometime soon. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corbin Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Got a good show for you today, lots of content, but before we get into anything else, Mr. Grizzly, how is your mental health today, sir?
Well, suffering a little bit because my physical health is not good. There's a bug going around town. A few of my friends have already got it, and I think I might have it now because I'm feeling terrible. I got a dog yelling at me here. Feeling terrible this morning. Got up at 5:30 this morning. Woke up and I'm like, no, I have to lie here. I can't get out. Everything just hurts too much. So I got up at 6, took a shower, and I was going to take her out. And it turns out I did have time, but I was just so tired. I'm like, I'm just going to lie down for a few more minutes. And then I popped on the computer to get everything ready this morning. And she's now whining at me because she knows her new schedule and I haven't taken her out this morning. So,
Oh,
yeah, she's not exactly excited with me at the moment. She's like, Dad, what's going on? We're supposed to be outside. What where are you? What's happening here? So, yeah.
you confused me.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Jeez.
So she's whining and she never barks at me. If I fall asleep on her, she'll bark at me. Just one short little yip to let me know to wake up. But she'll sit here and just, which is kind of funny. And because I'm not feeling great, I'm going to bow out pretty shortly. I think I'm just really not feeling good, and I have to take her out. I don't have a choice in that matter.
I'm glad you're not I'm not glad. I'm sad to learn that you're not at your best.
Yeah, well, and the worst part is like Monday I start my new job, and my plan Friday was to run a route. So do our show, and then 7:25 I'm out the door on the bus to see how long it's going to take me to get to the office.
Right.
That's the plan on Friday. Do a dry run because Monday is
Right.
Launch day, if you will. And if I'm feeling like this, it's like, oh boy. Yeah, best laid plans of mice and men, right?
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah. God. Yeah, and it's not great. My beaver sweetie here at home has picked up an ear infection.
Ew.
It's the same thing. It's like, they're not big things, right? Little bugs, whatnot, but it's just that thing that's there, that's just nagging you and just slowing you
Mhm.
down and dragging you down, especially when you're sitting there, like you said, it's like, you got shit to do.
Yeah, exactly. Got a lot of shit to do.
Same thing, I guess yesterday he was like, he's trying to he's teaching, right, still the finals, the midterms in a couple, not the midterms, the finals in a couple of weeks. So we still got a couple of weeks to go. And he's sitting there like this. It's like, I'm trying to prepare the next class I'm going to teach, and I'm trying to mark, and then I'm trying to write the final exam that the students are going to do. And like just every single second I'm doing this, there's this thing right here just
Mm.
hurting,
Can't
distracting you,
concentrate.
pulling you
Yeah.
away, and just and it's just like, can you just stop for 3 hours? I need to get stuff done. So yeah, yeah, not fun. Sorry, you're not
Well,
experienced.
and like I do recognize that we have a meeting at 9:30 and then another one this afternoon. 3:15, is that the
3:15, yeah.
15? Yeah. So I'll be present for those in spirit. Physically in body, I'll be here too, but I won't be 100%. But
Okay.
I'll be here for both those. Just giving you the heads up on
Okay.
that, so no
Well,
problem.
9:30 you can take off if you need to rest.
Right. Well, I'll get everything ready to go and,
Yeah.
and hang for as long as I can. But yeah, hopefully whatever this is gone by tomorrow, because I'm like, oh man,
Jeez.
I can't show up Monday sick after me telling them I haven't had a sick day in 4 years, which is true. I hadn't had a sick day in 4 years.
Oh, I know. But isn't that the way it is, right?
Yeah.
Yep. No, I could do this. Flat on your face. Oh. No, let me try again. That's not the debut I wanted to make.
Yeah, and the only thing I had left in the house to manage any of this, I have Voltaren for muscle aches and Benadryl. I'm out of aspirin, I'm out of Alka-Seltzer, I'm out of all the stuff that normally helps. So I'll take Miss Lola out here shortly, and then I'll do a run to I was going to say the Daypinner, the drugstore. I can go to the Daypinner. It's going to be a lot more expensive, and the selection's minimal, and they're also the tiny little bottles of aspirin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Little baby bottles of aspirin.
And in a pinch, great,
Yeah.
But,
Indeed.
yeah.
All right, kids and cubs. My mental health, doing great. Uh, just every single day, my foot's getting better, and every single day, I'm looking at. Um, so far, my planned return date to the tennis courts is July 31st.
Mhm.
Again, no running, just
Just do some
gingerly
hitting, right?
gingerly sauntering from side to side.
Maybe just play against the wall for a bit,
I thought about that too. There's a group of older gentlemen,
Mm.
in their 80s, and every now and then that I play with because not a lot of mobility and whatnot, and a lot of people sometimes don't want to play
Well, yeah, I
because
understand.
they'd rather do stuff, and I like it because, well, first of all, they're just lovely gentlemen too. I learn
Mm.
a lot from them,
Really.
because the breaks between when we do the changeovers from side to side, they lasted a little longer than 30 seconds to a
Mhm.
minute. So we chat more like this. So I learn a lot, but it also gives me a better chance to you know to practice my more subtle shots and trying to direct the ball because I'm not trying to hit the ball 75 meters away from where the guy
Mm.
is and make them stretch right. I'm
Yeah.
trying to hit them somewhere around where they are so that they can hit them back, right?
You can have a game of it, right? You're not trying to destroy them.
No, it's like we want to send the ball to them so that they can hit it back, so
And
that we
you'll
can
yeah.
send the ball back to them, so we can like this. And then and then sometimes they get you on a full run where you just have to smack one back, right? So like, and that will happen. But I mean, there's no point in trying to like bomb it like this and make every ball go past them. That there's no fun for them, right?
Well, yeah, and not only that, it gets boring for you real quick 'cause all you're doing is just serving. So it's like not
Exactly,
even have an opponent. Just
exactly.
work on your serve. I mean,
But it helps me like work on my placement and then like work on the more subtle shots, like the drop shot, throwing hitting the ball to someone's feet, right?
right.
Or shorten the side to get them to go like this rather than be full
Mm.
extension or all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I get a lot out of it and it does improve my game. There's no doubt about it. But now it's sort of like, okay, for the next few weeks, I'm one of you.
Yeah.
So don't send it corner to corner because normally I take the back, right, and somebody takes the front like this, and I just run from side to side
Mm.
as the windshield wiper me.
Yeah, I hear you.
So it's
Well,
like,
hopefully, by the 31st, you'll be in good enough shape to actually start playing again.
yeah,
I
well,
was
like I said, I won't be able to do full runs and stuff like
Mhm.
that, but at least, I figure if I can, go back on the court and, like I said, practice a few swings, like I said, or like, hit against a wall or something, it'll be doing something. But yes, I probably won't be running full tilt until sometime late August or something. So,
Well, extracurriculars for me right now are just not on any list anytime soon. It's everything costs money, and like the Blues Fest is on right now. And
mm,
for those of you who don't live in the Ottawa environs, Blues Fest is the biggest music festival in the Ottawa area. The only other one that might be bigger, which is upcoming, but it's only 2 days, is Osheaga in Montreal, which is a very big and great music festival. I've been before. But Blues Fest in Ottawa is over the course of 2 weeks. I think it's 10 days in total because it goes Wednesday to Sunday and then Wednesday to Sunday. So what's that? Yeah, that's about 10 days, if memory serves.
yeah,
It used to be sequential days. It would start on a Monday and go right through. But I think trying to fill the roster thinned it out a bit. And also, the Monday and Tuesday gives a break to all the staff that are working there for 2 days, right? So, and it's not like the staff aren't still doing things. There's just nobody participating.
right.
Like there's no ticket holders, and there's no shows, so they can get caught up on the things that have fallen behind on. So anyway, tonight I think it's Def Leppard as the headliner, and I'm like,
Oh,
I've seen them before. So I saw them back in
love them.
'88 when they were on their Adrenalize tour.
Right.
Adrenalize or Hysteria, which
Hysteria.
was a great. They did a theater in the round, and I loved it. It was wonderful. Um, and as for seeing them tonight, I'm like, meh. The artist I really wanted to see tonight is Rainwolf, who I've seen before and just puts on a smoking show. Just an amazing artist, and I've been recommending. Look, if you get a chance, go see Rainwolf. He'll blow your mind. So the other day, I was looking and I'm like, well, let's see if I can get cobble the funds together to go. And a ticket just for tonight is 114, and I'm like, that
Mm,
is out of my price range. It's out of my price range. I just can't do it. So I was like, well, oh well. So then I thought, well, they have the 3-day passes, and I thought, well, I can go Wednesday, which is today, and then Friday, which is Green Day, and then Saturday. I don't even remember who the headliner is on Saturday, but there's another blues artist I want to see, Kingfish. He's a young man I think he's from Mississippi, but an amazing player and a great singer, like a total bluesman. And he's only like 24 or 25. He's incredible. So I thought, let's get the 3-day pass. No, that's closer to $300.
mm,
So, unless I fall bass backwards into some luck, I'm not attending Blues Fest this year. It's just when you don't have the funds, you don't have the funds. And sure, I start my new job Monday, but I won't see any pay until the 31st of July.
yeah.
So what I have to stretch through until then. So, and don't forget, starting next week, I'm taking the bus to work every day and brown bagging it.
Yeah.
So,
Indeed. All right, kids and cubs, let's get into it. There are a couple of things before we get into the meat of the show because there has been some data that has come down with regard to inflation specifically. Um, both Canada and the United States had some inflation data come out, and both of them tell some slightly different stories. Now, in both nations, um, the rate of inflation did tick up. We have the conservatives yelling and screaming again on cue because, if inflation goes up even just a little tiny little bit, then all of a sudden, oh my God, life's unaffordable and it's all Carney or whoever's fault and yada yada yada. Um, and they're doing that again today. They're doing that again, and they're doing it in two ways in particular. But according to the Financial Post here, this is Gigi Suhanik. Rising inflation in June is solidifying economists' call that the Bank of Canada will stay on the sidelines at its next interest rate meeting on July 30th and increases doubt about a possible cut at its September meeting. The consumer price index rose to 1.9% in June, according to Statistics Canada on Tuesday, which matched analysts' estimates, but that's up from a 1.7% increase in May. I think when we reported that, one of that reasons that it went down, well, here, they're actually mentioning it here in the story. Inflation remains below the Bank of Canada target of 2%, but some economists attribute that to the cancellation of consumer carbon tax in April. However, they also said there are signs that retaliatory tariffs are increasing prices. Year. Elevated core inflation suggests cost pressures persist in the economy, likely driven by the earlier depreciation of the loonie and the impact of retaliatory tariffs, says Thomas Ryan, North American economist at Capital Economics Limited. For example, the consumer price index, excluding gas, held steady at 2.7% in June, just under the top end of the Bank of Canada's target range for inflation of 1% to 3%. But the Bank of Canada's preferred measures of inflation, the core CPI trim and CPI median, have remained stubbornly higher than policymakers would like. Trim held at 3% in June, and median rose to 3.1%. And I'll have to be totally honest, I'm going to have to read a bit more what the differences are between CPI trim and CPI median, and then the 1.9 that we have as the overall inflation rate. Like I said, I'm not an economist. I understand a lot of things just from having followed it. But those for me, I usually just look at the mainline number that's been reported in the press, and that's 1.9, which is still below 2. Which is still good. But then you're seeing all the other numbers, and I'm not enough of an expert to know what they mean. So hopefully I will have a chance to talk to a few economists and find out a little bit more about that. But the article goes on to say, sorry?
But Rachel Thomas here is just blatantly lying, as did her dear leader, Pierre Poilievre.
Yes, indeed. Do you have that?
Yeah, it's on the screen right now.
Okay.
Rachel Thomas. Carney says he's fiscally responsible. The 3.4% core inflation rate says he's not. You can't spend your way out of inflation. It's time to cut waste and get serious. And you responded, where did you get the 3.4% number? Gentle reminder that the Bank of Canada has 3 measures of core inflation, none of which are at 3.4%. CPI trim, 3%. CPI median, 3.1%. CPI common, 2.6%. Total CPI was 1.9%. They just can't stop lying.
Yep. And there's a shout out to Timothy Hoyer, who had provided those 3 other numbers, and I cited him in responding and asking that question. They just say things. They literally just say things.
Oh yeah.
It's really weird. This party is weird. This pushes the 3-month annualized rate. This is probably what she's talking about here, which the Bank of Canada watches closely, to a 6-month high of 3.5%, Ryan said. Maybe that's what she was looking at. She probably looked through the data and found what was the worst absolute number, and then went to that. He said retaliatory tariffs pushed up prices for clothing and footwear and health and personal care. Quote, the doors now firmly slammed shut on a July rate cut from the Bank of Canada, with the September cut looking shaky. Capital had been calling for 2 more rate cuts this year. Quote, the major measures of core inflation both remain stubbornly stuck right around 3%, Douglas Porter, chief economist at BMO Capital Markets, said in a note, adding that the share of goods in the CPI basket that remain elevated hasn't continued to improve either. He said it's hard to square why core inflation remains so sticky given that Canada's economy is slowing, but attributed to shelter inflation receding only gradually and tariffs. Rent inflation accelerated in June, and mortgage costs were up 5.6% year over year, while tariffs are applying pressure on the price of goods such as vehicles, clothing, footwear, and furniture. Quote, the quick read is that the overall report really gives the Bank of Canada no opening to cut interest rates at the upcoming meeting on July 30th, Porter said, adding that core inflation would need to materially cool for a September rate cut to be in play. Quote, we continue to expect Canada's restrained approach to retaliation to tariffs from the U.S. administration will limit the impact of the trade war on Canadian consumer prices, Abby Zhu, an economist at Royal Bank of Canada, said in a note. A recent RBC report estimated that 86% of us that were hit by Canadian counter levies were eligible for relief. In June, shed prices for made-in-Canada products and domestic services grew alongside improvements in business sentiment, resilient consumer spending trends, and a rebounding labor market. Zhu said that the increased share of items in the CPI basket rising more than 3% annualized marked, quote, the broadest inflationary pressure observed so far in 2025. She also said the year-over-year increase in prices for clothing and footwear to 2% from 0.5% was notable. RBC is also standing pat on its call that the Bank of Canada is done cutting rates for now, Quote, while downside risks to economic growth persist, recent data is consistent with our base case view that the Bank of Canada will not cut interest rates again in this cycle, having opted to skip cuts at its last two meetings. And then from CIBC, just adding to the consensus here, firmer price pressures today reflected a mix of forces. Ali Jaffrey, an economist at CIBC Capital Markets, said, it's likely that tariff pass-through is part of the story for goods, along with some past depreciation of the Canadian dollar. But we don't necessarily see a lot of evidence of cost pressures building due to the rewiring of trade, something the Bank of Canada is looking out for, he said, adding that companies will adjust to demand and supply more gradually. Overall, the increases in prices seen today don't really look very durable and look more like an idiosyncratic price level adjustment, especially considering the widening slack, high economic uncertainty, and slowing income gains. So that's the sort of overall picture that we got here. But in the United States, right, well, you have conservatives trying to push that fear button here. In the United States, their core rate, or their, the overall or the headline rate, which is 1.9% here in Canada, theirs went up to 2.7, I believe. So the pressure from the tariffs in the United States is a lot. I think Peter Navarro bragging yesterday that the United States has brought in $106 billion in tariff. That's $106 billion in Americans'
Taxes.
money that are taxed. It's like it's a GST, if you will, on everything that they sell there.
They always talk about no taxation without representation, which is their big thing. That's why they had a revolution, right?
Right.
And they go on and on about, we don't want to increase our taxes. No matter what, no matter how you break it down for them, they absolutely do not want to pay 1 cent more in taxes. Okay, we'll put tariffs on. Tariffs, that's great. The manufacturer pays that. No, they don't. You do. And everything in your nation has gotten more expensive as a direct result of the actions of your idiot leader.
Yep.
And there's people who still defend him and don't even recognize how much they're suffering. Now, a lot of people have had their, for want of a better term, come to Jesus moment where they've come to realize that I'm screwed and it's all because of him.
Yep. In the United States, consumer prices rose 2.7% in June from a year earlier, the Labor Department said, Tuesday, up from an annual increase of 2.4% in May. On a monthly basis, prices climbed 0.3% from May to June after rising just 0.1% the previous month. Worsening inflation poses a political challenge for President Donald Trump, who promised during last year's presidential campaign to immediately lower costs. The sharp inflation spike of 2022-2023 was the worst in 4 decades and soured most Americans on the former President Joe Biden's handling of the economy. Higher inflation will also likely heighten the Federal Reserve's reluctance to cut its short-term interest rate, as Trump is loudly demanding and keeps on threatening to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell before the time. There were some stories going around in the news in certain media that are not as reputable, signaling that Mr. Powell had bowed or surrendered to the relentless pressure campaign that Donald Trump has been putting on, and saying that he announced that he would be retiring early. But I only saw that in one place and didn't see it anywhere else, and asked around. And I don't believe that that's a particularly true story if you hear some of that happening on the web, because Jerome Powell has been rather adamant that he is going to complete his term. Now, his term is over in a year or less, which means that Donald Trump at some point is going to have a Fed chair, who I'm sure the condition of the job is going to be, if I pressure you to lower interest rates, you do. And central bank policy should not be set by the leader of a nation, ever. So that might, when that happens, get ready to hold on to your hats.
Well,
investment wise,
he wanted to get us out of inflation with Bitcoin.
Yeah. Gee, I wonder where I heard that before. Oh yeah, that was a PR thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Trump has often insisted in comments on social media that there is no inflation and that as a result, the central bank should swiftly reduce its key interest rates from its current level of 4.3% to around 3, excluding the volatile food and energy categories. Core inflation increased 2.9% in June from a year earlier, up from 2.8%. Um, so basically, what's been going on? The thing that's going on in the United States that's not getting a lot of coverage here, because we're hearing individual stories, but nobody's putting them together, is that a lot of Americans' revenue is being cut.
Mhm.
There are job losses in the United States as well as a result of these tariffs. And then when you look at these bills that have just passed, right, people's Medicaid is going to be affected. Um, and with Medicaid, right, the thing in the United States is that a lot of the state programs that are Medicaid have different names, right? They have like names like Heritage Health, for example, like if you're in Nebraska.
Yeah.
So the people who voted for the cuts for Medicaid for those other people don't realize how many people in their own regions actually used Medicaid because it's called something like Heritage Health.
Mhm.
Yes. And they didn't realize when they were voting, well, if the hospitals, especially in the more rural and smaller towns, have a lot of people on Medicaid and then their Medicaid is cut, that the hospital for everyone, whether you're on Medicaid or not,
Mhm.
will close, or the clinic. There's one clinic in Nebraska that has already announced that it will be closing already before the things even came into an effect. Once it was passed, they knew. So there's a lot of people that are going to suffer. So people are losing their Medicaid. People are losing their SNAP benefits.
Mhm. Which
At the
is the
same time, simultaneously,
SNAP is food
prices are
stamps.
going up. Yes,
Mhm.
SNAP is food stamps. Prices are going up for the tariffs. So things that you didn't have to pay for, now you do. They're cutting the amount of money that they have and raising the prices all at the same time. It's not going to take long before people start getting mad. You take the food out of people's mouth, you take the medication out of their hand, and you jack up the price of everything they need to buy while adding costs on them and reducing their income. It's not going to take 3 years for people to notice that and get mad.
Do you hear the people singing the songs of angry men? I mean, right?
Like, if they did one and then waited a year and maybe but they're doing them all at the same time. Nobody's going to have any time to adjust when it hits.
No.
So, um, yesterday when we were talking a little bit about, trade and what's going on, and maybe, we're going to have to find a way to hunker down. Like I said, handle the worst because the worst is not going to stop. One of the things that could change the dynamic for us is the fact that people in the United States are going to be noticing rather damn quickly that they suddenly have a whole lot less disposable income and way higher costs.
Oh, yeah.
Like this, and a whole bunch of new things that they need to pay for out of pocket anymore that they didn't have to before. Uh, if you've seen the clips of people going to town halls already and tearing strip off Republicans so much so that Republicans don't actually want to have town halls anymore.
They just shut them down
Yeah.
because they can't face their critics.
Uh,
They can't face the constituents who are being harmed by their policies.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to be like once the price of bread really goes up. The amount of money with which you have to buy bread goes down, and all of a sudden you have to decide between bread and that hospital visit bill you had to take because, well, you're only taking your diabetes medication 33% of the time. You're having complications. That's going to hit, and it's going to hit for a lot of people very quickly. I think it's
Oh, yeah.
18 million people who are going to lose their Medicaid completely.
Yes, and what was the explanation by a congressperson? Well, we'll just transition those folks to work in the fields.
Mm-hmm.
Forced labor, carrot, stick, right? This is a tyrannical government.
And then, on the other side, well, we're all going to die sometime.
Well, and then the other statement I heard was, well, most people have insurance through their employer. No, most people don't. A lot of people do. Also, what about retirees? Are they going to have to start working? And actually, many do in the United States. People in their 80s have had to go back to work part-time, usually because they can't do full-time, just to get insurance for healthcare coverage. It's just absurd.
And there are only so many positions as Walmart greeters.
Yeah.
So yeah, listen, as bad as it's gonna get here, and as much as the conservatives are gonna press the button here that things are getting bad, when it hits there,
Oh, yeah.
there's only gonna be so long he's gonna be able. Donald Trump does not like personal pain, and Donald Trump really wants to be liked.
Oh, yeah.
So if you think he's been tacoing himself before, unless once it hits, we see a whole new version of Donald Trump pop up,
Mm.
the like whatever the 75th mask comes off and goes, ha ha ha, this is my real face. Because how many times has he done that so far? Unless all of a sudden he just simply stops caring
Well, and
whatsoever, or at least pretending that he cares. Like, see, the thing is, I assume based on everything that he wants to be liked, given everything that he's been seeing so far. But if that part too is also just an act, says, okay, well, now that you're all suffering like this, and I know you're all mad, I don't care.
I mean, that can lead
That could happen.
That leads into the entire cancellation of the USAID program.
Yep.
Emergency food. So it's, and I put this in the title. A Trump admin reportedly set to burn 500 tons of emergency food instead of distributing it. The food, which could feed 1.5 million children for a week, is set to expire today. The food was earmarked for children in Afghanistan and Pakistan. The rations in question are high-energy biscuits, which hold nutritional needs for children under 5. They're usually given out in scenarios where people have lost their homes and aid groups have not yet been able to set up kitchens. The biscuits were stored in a warehouse in Dubai, but since the Trump administration halted practically all foreign assistance, they have not been distributed, even though federal workers sent the leaders of USAID repeated requests to ship them while they were edible. Are they cruel just for the sake of being cruel, or is it a genocide? And I pose this. I know this is far-reaching, but is it a genocide? Because this is to serve children in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So his take on it is, well, those are shithole countries. That's Trump's words, right? So if we wipe out the next generation, we don't have to worry about any of them moving here. Now, I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but if you put your thinking cap on and apply some critical thought to that and look at all the things that administration has done up till today, tell me I'm far off the mark there, because I don't think we are.
Well, if you add that the cancellation of PEPFAR too and all of that kind of stuff, I mean, people will die.
People will die.
Right? There's no doubt about that.
Doesn't care.
You asked about the cruelty thing. There's this quote by Candian: "Cruelty is how weak people pretend to be powerful."
Yes. Very true.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on here. So yeah, inflation numbers, like I said, saying what they say. We've got what's going on in the United States. And, well, since we're talking about that here, um, actually, you know what? Let's put a pin in that
Hmm.
because we'll get back to the tariff thing. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to mention before we get into that because we've given a lot of talk to the tariff thing here. There's something that we wanted to show yesterday with regard to Pierre Poilievre, and
Mm.
we got into other topics and we veered off and we didn't get to show that. But you had some things, Mr. Grizzly, with regard to what Pierre is trying to do to the Prime Minister with regard to the conflict of interest screen. Now, just to give a quick recap here, is you remember during the election campaign and the lead up to it, the Prime Minister, then candidate,
Hmm. Correct.
took everything he had and gave it to the ethics commissioner before being an MP, before I think even before being party leader, if I'm remembering correctly officially.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
100%
not remember
sure.
where in time like this.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that one. But definitely before becoming prime minister, significantly before being prime minister. And remember, he had like 60 days after becoming prime minister to file all that stuff. So he became prime minister April 28th, May. So June 28th would have been the time where he had to submit that.
Mhm.
He did it before,
Well before.
well before. Also sat for security
I thought it
clearance
was
and obtained it.
120 days.
It could be 120 days, and the ethics commissioner has 60 days to do it, or
I
the
think that's what it
leader has
is.
60 days, and the ethics commissioner has 120. It's one of the two. But
It was
yeah,
done well
I think you
before.
might be right. I think he might be 120 days. So he
Correct.
wouldn't even have to have done it yet.
And he did well in advance of the deadline.
And now we have the answer already.
Mhm.
Okay, so he took everything, submitted it to him. Now Pierre Poilievre, during the election campaign, kept on asking him, demanding that he make everything public now. The reason for that is because once that was public, every day of the campaign, Pierre Poilievre could have taken one thing, ran to a mic and said, "Oh my God, he's so conflicted and corrupted because this," and then the next day, this thing that he holds, right? Pierre Poilievre wanted to replace the ethics commissioner, do his own evaluation, which I'm sure would have been totally of good faith, of Mark Carney's assets, while he himself, leader of the party, now for at least 3 years, has never done that once because there is no requirement for the leader of the opposition. I believe that this should be a requirement for all party leaders because all party leaders theoretically have a chance of becoming prime minister,
Mhm.
and while they are leader of their parties, can be talking to stakeholders with whom they could be making deals. If ever I become prime minister, this is what's there. Should probably have follow the same rules. This should not be everybody keeps saying, well, the prime minister is the one that makes decisions for like this. Yeah, but other people have the opportunities to make decisions too.
Well, and they could table legislation or table a bill that favors that corporation that they're a major shareholder in as the leader of a party.
Yeah.
And tell me that's never happened
Yeah.
because you
There are
can't.
right, exactly. There are some limits to private members' bills in terms of what you can do financially with them, I
Mhm.
believe. But yes, but the notion that only the prime minister is the
Mm.
person because they have decision making power that can make some deals that present a potential conflict is a cute one that we should probably shelve
Mhm.
and assume that all people can do that. Now, everybody has a disclosure. All MPs have a minimum disclosure that they have to do, but
Mhm.
again, the threshold gets higher the higher your rank. But Pierre has assets, and they've been submitted in his capacity as an MP when he was an MP to the ethics commissioner, and we have that data. But he's not forced to divest anything
No.
or put them in a blind trust, whatnot. So he's demanding. He who really, 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 really wants to become prime minister has an opportunity to lead by example here. Hey, say McCartney, I did it,
It's,
right? But he won't.
rules for thee, not for me.
Well, yes. Well, not only rules for thee, not for me, but Pierre Poilievre wanted to establish a brand new process single out
Mhm.
Mark Carney for extremely special treatment
Mhm.
and he himself create a whole new process that he would set the standard, he would decide what the rules are, and then he would tell us whether or not Mark Carney is in a conflict. Gee, what are the odds that if Pierre Poilievre was judge, jury, and executioner on that, that his conclusion would be that everything's fine with Mark Carney? Right? This was a setup. Mark Carney did everything that the law required before the law even required it. The ethics commissioner did his work in quiet, private,
Mhm.
as the ethics commissioner should, looked through all of those things, issued the report,
Mhm.
and as pretty much anybody would expect, considering that Mark Carney was a central banker, Mark Carney is known to be a man of a certain wealth. And given that he is a central banker and a man of certain wealth, is probably very well invested. Well, and not only is he really well invested, he's very broadly invested.
Mhm.
An extremely diversified portfolio and a whole bunch of things. Right? The conservatives get the ethics report and acting like, oh my God, what a surprise. Look at how conflicted he is. Over 103. Gee, he hid this. If only he had been transparent with Canadians. He had been transparent. He filed all the documents with the ethics commissioner as the law requires before it was required. There's nothing underhanded. There's no lack of transparency. Everything was absolutely clear, done by the book. Pierre is just mad
He's just a
that he
blowhard.
didn't. Yeah, he's just mad that he didn't get to supplant the ethics commissioner and be the one to tell us what Mark Carney's potential conflicts were.
Mind blowing to me though is the amount of people online that went, "There's 106 conflicts that we gotta oust them right now," because people who like to rage farm and put up clickbait and they make a lot of money off of that will continue to do so. Like when can we put a stop to blatant outright lies that has to do with political policy in this country? When can we start fining people for printing mis and disinformation? Now the argument would be said, well, that would be a charter violation because you're violating their freedom of expression. And I'm like, are we violating a freedom of expression when you knowingly, willfully lie to the public to stir up garbage on a politician you don't care for?
Yep. There are limits
It's
to that. That's why we have defamation laws, right?
exactly. Like it's no secret we're not fans of Pierre Poilievre. But we're not going to tell you stories that we've about him unless they've been 100% vetted and verified. I'm not going to share stuff about the man that we cannot prove is real. I don't know what his asset are. I don't know what his holdings are. People have said he's worth 9, 10, 12 million. I don't know any of that.
Yep.
I've never seen a single verifiable document to prove me he's worth that much. Maybe he is. I don't know. But until you can prove it to me, show bank statements or bank drafts or something that proves what his net worth is, I'm simply not going to believe it.
And nobody has access to that except him,
Correct.
unless
Because
he
it's
makes
on the
them
blind
public.
trust. And it
Exactly.
won't be made public.
No, but I mean, Pierre Poilievre. I mean, unless Pierre
Yes.
Poilievre says, well, here's all the deeds to all my stuff and puts them out on the table the way that he was asking Mark Carney to do. It's like the bank statement that he gets for his own stuff, the investment report that shows the return,
Mhm.
the lien to whatever properties. Yeah, those are his.
Those are his.
Only he
And
and the people he allows to see them know what's in them. Anybody
well, and
else
right
that
now,
can, yeah,
right
anybody
now
else,
he's a private citizen.
yeah,
So he's not
anybody,
even a member of one.
yeah, anybody that says anything, says I know how much Pierre is worth, is lying
Yeah.
because Pierre
Unless
Poilievre has never made that information public.
you're handling his portfolio, there's no way for you to know that.
Now,
It's not because it's not public information. It's not public knowledge.
yeah, now he did hand some stuff to the ethics commissioner, so the ethics commissioner can do that stuff. So he too followed those rules, but there is no requirement for divestment. Pierre Poilievre is also invested over several companies if you consider that he has a broad-based Canadian ETF, which is invested in a whole bunch of smaller companies. I'm sure that Mark Carney has a whole bunch of broad-based ETFs as well.
Well, he was a central banker, so I think he'd know how to diversify his portfolio.
Right? So it's not that hard to be invested over 103 companies today with ETFs.
It's not difficult at all.
Right?
Hell, RRSPs are diversified.
Right.
An RRSP holds funds and it holds shares in multiple funds, ETFs as an example. So, having an RRSP and watching it grow, it's because it's diversified. So, people are splitting hairs here. I have the clip from yesterday with David Cochran that we wanted to air but didn't get to. Let's have a look at this.
What do you make of this? We knew Mark Carney has means. He's a successful business guy. He's complied with the law. And now that we have some details, a call for him to sell everything because he's in a conflict of interest. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting listening to Mr. Poilievre come out and provide a new standard for him to apply to Mr. Carney. That similar standards, for example, Nigel Wright, former chief of staff to Prime Minister Harper, when Mr. Poilievre was in that government. At the end of the day, it's very granular about blind trusts, screens, all these kinds of things. I think the real issue here is does working with the ethics commissioner and meeting a bar, is that good enough for most Canadians? What I think what Mr. Poilievre is doing is he's saying, well, that's not good enough. I want a new standard on top of that. We keep changing the standards. Certainly, Mr. Carney has a tremendous amount of wealth. I think for Canadians to judge whether or not he's done all this, they're going to see, is he complying by the rules set out by the ethics commissioner? I think that bar is being achieved. Is there really any direct conflict that he's going to really make decisions based on enriching himself? Do you think really that's why he got into this position to begin with? I don't think so. So if you take a look at all the issues that Canadians are facing, we've got Trump, we've got tariffs, we've got wildfires, whether or not Mr. Carney is exceeding the expectations or the rules that the ethics commissioner themselves are putting out. I don't know if Mr. Poilievre doesn't have other issues that he should be maybe dealing with this upcoming week.
Lisa, I saw you shaking your head a few times as Brad was talking there. Why?
Well, because there's a binary choice made by the public office holder at the very beginning of this process. And if you have holdings that are going to be subject to conflict of interest regulations, your choice is either to, one, divest or to put in a blind trust. That's your decision-making point. The Prime Minister chose to go with a blind trust. As a result, everything that flows from that moment in time, I think, is fair game in terms of questioning whether or not the blind trust is holding, whether or not the conflicts are things that can be managed, because it is put to him, and I'm being very clear on this, he made the choice to not divest. That's one of the options that is given. If you don't take that option, you do open yourself up to criticism and to being watched as to how clearly and quickly and safely these conflict of interest holds or these contract of interest screens are put in place. I think it's completely legitimate for Pierre to point it out. I think it's legitimate for him to point out the fact that they could have divested as well as easily and avoided all of this discussion, but he didn't.
But the blind trust counts as divestment under the Accountability Act, right? You can divest in one of two ways, it says in the legislation, sell or use a blind trust. So it is divestment,
Sure, that's the point. That's exactly what I'm saying, though.
No.
What I'm saying
No,
is
you're
he
not.
had a choice to either liquidate or to keep in a blind trust. He chose not to liquidate. He chose to put in a blind trust, therefore opening himself up to criticism on how that blind trust is going to actually be carried out. And I think that's fair game. And I think it should be tested. And I reject the notion of saying, well, he seems like a really nice guy and he doesn't need the money, so therefore everything should be okay. The law is blind. Right? This is supposed to be something that you look at without actually putting in a person's character at the end of the day. You have to abide by the law. He's chosen. Most people choose the route that he took, but most people should also expect to have those things questioned, including the fact that it's 103 different screens, which can be complex. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it does mean that you're going to get questioned on it. And I don't have a problem with this route at all.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's stop there
Vanda,
right there for a
this?
second.
I mean,
So you'll notice the shifting goalposts in there,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Oh, very much so.
Because at first she is trying to say that there are two options, which there are: put things into a blind trust, or what she calls divest. What she really means is what she said the second time: liquidate.
Mhm.
The blind trust or an actual liquidation are both forms of divestment.
Mhm.
So at first, she was trying to create the impression that he chose not to divest. And then she was called on it because, well, that's what I was saying. No, that's not what you were saying. And then you see that she's just switched the language to liquidate. Everything else she did say is true at that point. The character of someone should not matter. You just comply with the law. That's all that matters. Are there screens? Yes. Do most people choose to put to a blind trust rather than just divest? Absolutely. Like this. Does that invite questions as to how the screens are being operated, and are the screens actually effective? Absolutely. All of that is true. Does it mean he was not transparent, as Pierre claims? No. And the other claim that Pierre is making is that, and you're going to hear this all over the web, is that, oh, Mark Carney said he was only controlling cash and personal real estate when he was campaigning. Well, now we find out that's a lie because he's got 103 screens. No,
No.
that is incorrect, because there's this thing called time and sequencing. Events happen in time and events happen in a sequence. Prime Minister Carney submitted everything to the blind trust and then said, the only things now under my control are cash and my personal real estate. He didn't say, I only have cash
No.
and personal real estate
No.
before he filed and divested to the blind trust. He divested to the blind trust, filed, and then told Canadians, only thing under my control as of this point on is cash and my personal real estate. Conservatives are now lying about that,
And
claiming that the Prime Minister claimed that before he filed. That is not true. It's after.
yeah, she makes a big circle to come back to the original system. Well, yes, that's, everything is done correctly. But still
And I
trying to
don't have a problem
paint a
with this
picture that's the opposite of that, right?
route at all.
Gotcha. Okay, Vandana, your thoughts on this?
I mean, I hear Liz's point. I just don't think it benefits Mr. Poilievre in this regard. And I think the reason is because most Canadians understand, and ethics commissioner has advised on this, that he has an ethics screen to them. I know it's complex, and I think it's meant to be complex because I'm sure there's a lot of holdings there of some sort. But I would say that I don't think that's what Canadians are thinking about. I think they're thinking about, to Brad's point, tariffs. They're thinking about the cost of living. And I think for Mr. Poilievre, I mean, I heard his interview with Catherine Cullen, and I thought it sounded like he has grown a lot. He was talking about Conservatives here to help support the government, to help protect Canadians against these tariffs. And that sounds better. But I saw the sinister sounding statement of it about, like, he like, it's like a secretive type of, like, as if he tried to, like, slip it under and so no one would notice. I think that's why Canadians get tired of politics. They don't want politics for the sake of politics. They do want people to ask the right questions and to raise points that are legitimate. But I think in this regard, I don't think it benefits him in any way. I don't think most Canadians would pay attention. They think they know that there's an ethics screen. The ethics commissioner has said that was fine, and I think that's enough for them.
Well, so on this, because Brad mentioned, sorry, you want a quick rebuttal there, Lisa? I want to show something from the archives, but did you want to jump back in?
I know what you're going to show from the archives, so I'm maybe stepping on your point.
Yeah,
but I was just going to say that being around long enough allows you to actually experience this before in another way. In October of 2010, it was my friend Wayne Easter, it was Dominic LeBlanc, it was lots of different people asking the same questions about conflict of interest screens to Nigel Wright at the time, and we defended it. So it's turnabout is fair play. If they could ask the questions back then, we can ask the questions today.
Well, I was a younger man with hair in St. John's, Newfoundland when all of that was happening. So, but I want to play part of an exchange. Yeah. This is at committee, and Stephen Harper's chief of staff at the time, Nigel Wright, very successful businessman, came into public service with a lot of holdings and had to set up some of the mechanisms similar to what the Prime Minister is going through now. He was at committee, and one of the MPs asking him questions was a young man from Carleton, Nepean at the time. Just have a listen to this.
Can you explain the purpose behind the blind trust?
This blind trust follows a form that was created and drafted by the Ethics Commissioner. I transferred all of my controlled assets into the blind trust in late October. The blind trustee is the legal owner of them all now, and I'm not to have any communication of any sort, no direction, no advice, no information about what's in there. I do not know and will not know what's in there.
There seems to be some misunderstanding in the way that this has been debated by some members. We have to recognize that there are going to be people in this world of public service that come from different backgrounds that obviously the government interacts with, but that is a strength for our country.
Okay, that's from 2010. We went back 4 years earlier, too. The video for this doesn't exist, but the transcript, this is another committee appearance where Mr. Poilievre, who's the Nepean Carleton MP at the time, debating with Duff Conacher from Democracy Watch. This is when the Conservatives were bringing in the Accountability Act. And he defends blind trust, saying we would not know anything since it's a completely blind trust. So we would not know what we held. That's why it's blind. You would have no knowledge that you owned it. So how could you possibly be voting in favor of your private interests if you didn't know what those private interests were? Brad, that sounds like a vigorous defense of the ethics laws that are in place, which were criticized today as not being sufficient.
Well, yeah, and what Mr. Poilievre is suggesting is that there are two paths you can take. You can liquidate, or you can do the blind trust. When a conservative is up on the stand, then blind trusts are completely legitimate. They're 100% secure. Canadians have no concerns whatsoever. The decisions are going to be made in the Prime Minister's office that would enrich the individual in question. But then, of course, when Mr. Poilievre is in opposition, only liquidation is the way to go, and blind trusts open the floodgates open to miss. It's hypocritical, obviously, because if they are both legitimate, they're legitimate in 2006, they're legitimate in 2010, but in 2025 they're no longer legitimate. He was in government. He could have gotten rid of the blind trust and ensured he was in government for many years. Mr. Poilievre was. He did not take the time to eliminate the blind trust as an option. Now we've got two options on the table for Mr. Carney. He chose the blind trust route, and unfortunately for Mr. Poilievre, that's not convenient politically. So he now has to criticize it. But what he can't do is suggest that blind trusts are good for Mr. Wright, Mr. Nigel Wright, back in 2010, but they're no longer legitimate for the Prime Minister. Maybe he could make the case that for staff there's one set of rules and electeds there's another set of rules. But Mr. Poilievre, after all the years in government, never made that case. And I think Canadians are just going to put up their hands and say, listen, as long as the Ethics Commissioner is there and he's abiding by the rules, they're probably not going to have too big of a deal with it unless they already had a problem with him being rich. They probably didn't vote for him back in the federal election anyways.
All right, so let's stop that there. The rest, that's about the major
That's
part
the meat
of the
of it,
content. Yeah, meat of it. Now, two things I want to make very clear here. The Prime Minister is not currently in a conflict of interest position.
No,
He
he's
has
not.
the potential for conflict of interests. The rest depends on how the screens are managed. Now, those screens are going to be managed from the PMO, right? The Mr. Bachchan and Mr. Sabia and them who are really close to him, who know most what he's going to see, are going to determine, this you can't talk about, you can't weigh in on this, you can weigh in on. One of the other tests are going to be, however, because it is so broad, right? His holdings are so broad. Somebody's going to have to make a test as to, on this subject, yes, it does affect a company with which you were once invested or a company for whom you once worked. Liz, now, is this law disproportionately affecting that company, or is it treating that company like one among many others? If it's one among many others, he's going to be able to weigh in because the decision won't adversely advantage won't positively advantage or adversely disadvantage a company in any way, shape, or form because it's broad-based and it applies to everybody in that sector. But if they're doing something, we're doing something for this particular sector, but this particular thing is something that this one particular company has 60% of the market share of, and all everybody else is 40. Well, then that's the type of thing because no, you can't, right? So those decisions are going to have to be made by those in the PMO that are closest to him and know him best. That's where potential for conflict of interest happens. Because the debate will be, it's like, well, no, that one was over the line. He shouldn't. Well, that one was, and you're going to have that sort of back and forth debate. Expect the Conservatives to do that a lot. They're going to occupy committees left, right, and center, asking for information and documents, whatnot, all the time.
Wasting our time and money.
Yes. Because, yes, why you cannot say, well, he looks like a decent man, or like they said for Trump, well, he's a rich man. He doesn't need to be, we don't need to worry about him. Why does he need the money? And then we saw what Donald Trump did to the Treasury, just taking money out of it, right? So you have to be vigilant. You have to ask the questions. You have to have the people there. Yes, it is legitimate to question and to investigate and whatnot. But if that's all they end up doing, if it becomes a 24/7, every single committee is looking at, let's see how Mark Carney is corrupt now. Yes, they're going to lose favor with the Canadian public very quickly, particularly if Mark Carney is going to be ethical. And let's also make it very clear that Mark Carney, by virtue of having been the governor of the Bank of Canada, by virtue of having been the governor of the Bank of England, and by having obtained his secret compartmentalized information level security clearance, has already had his finances tested way more often than Pierre has, who hasn't even submitted to them once. And in all these processes, never once have we ever heard any news about him behaving in a way that is unethical. There is no reason for Canadians to suspect that that's suddenly going to stop now.
Yeah, now that he has the focus and the spotlight and he's living under a microscope, now he's going to start doing unethical things? Like, really?
Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. There's no way he would have gotten that security clearance that he needs.
Yes. Because all your financials are looked at when you go through top secret. When you go through that's cosmic clearance. Everything is looked at with a fine-tooth comb. You live under an electron microscope.
Yeah. So whatever it is Pierre's trying to do here, it's not working for him.
Well, shouldn't Pierre, who is not a member of Parliament and is running to be a member of Parliament, stop talking about the Prime Minister and maybe, I don't know, go to the riding that he wants to represent, supposedly?
Well, he's still not doing that. Apparently, the other day he was campaigning for a seat in Battle River Crowfoot from Richmond.
Yeah.
BC.
What's he doing in BC?
So still not there. I mean, what Bonnie Crombie? I keep saying Bonnie Critchley. I got Bonnie Crombie on my mind because we're doing something later on about Bonnie Crombie today. Bonnie Critchley saying about him is true. Absolutely true. It's like he thinks that the decision is assumed. And he might have another thing come. But right now, Pierre Poilievre is lying to you about the conflicts, is lying to you about Prime Minister Carney having tried to hide them, is lying to you about Prime Minister Carney having said that he controls only cash and personal real estate before he submitted everything and divested to the blind trust. He has party minions going out lying, saying that, blind trust is not the same thing as divesting. Yes, it is.
According to the Ethics Commissioner, didn't Lisa Raitt come around to say, well, yeah, I do realize it's the same thing.
Yes.
Then what is your problem?
Yes. And you have the guy, because there's always tape for everything, who knew back in 2006 and in 2011 that these things existed and were fine and how they worked, who has suddenly forgotten how they work. And let's remember again, as we learn from this clip, if we're putting all the dots together, that just like equalization, the conflict of interest rules that right now apply, thanks to the Accountability Act, are Stephen Harper's own rules that Pierre voted for and did not campaign on changing.
came out and fully supported and just said about Nigel Wright, you realize that some people in the public eye and public office come from a background where they had earned significant amounts of money, and we shouldn't punish them for that. I'm like,
That's back when conservatives believed that making money was a good thing.
yeah. I'm going to have to go. Sorry. Lola's really eager to get out. So thanks, everybody. I will see you again tomorrow. Till such time as we meet again. You take care of yourselves, and I will do my best to recover as quickly as possible. See you soon.
Wishing you good health.
Thanks.
All right. So, conservatives here are doing a lot of work to try to discredit the prime minister and make him appear like some type of monster who's just greedy. They're trying to turn him into a version of Mr. Burns, essentially. Right? I'm not sure that they're going to be that successful here, but they are not tethering whatever attempt they are making in any form of consistent reality that's observable and objective. They're just making stuff up. They're trying to create a new process, a new test that applies only to Prime Minister Carney, when the test that exists now is their own test that they put in place. It was their first act, was that Accountability Act. It was their signature piece. So if that Accountability Act now has all these terrible, terrible, terrible loopholes that make it such that the Prime Minister must actually liquidate, well, those terrible, terrible, terrible loopholes existed back then as well. And let us also not forget that when it comes to Nigel Wright, with all of his money, when it came to that Mike Duffy case, for some reason, we got a court case in which somebody was accused criminally of having taken a bribe, but nobody was ever accused criminally of having offered a bribe. You would think if bribe indeed there was, that there would be two parties on the stand in two individual trials, one for offering a bribe and one for taking one, but that never happened. Just a little note of curiosity here. So yes, the conservatives definitely rules for thee, but not for me. But not only that, new rules for you that have never applied to anyone else ever, just because you're not one of us. And therefore, because you're not one of us, inherently you must be corrupt and underhanded and sneaky and looking for an opportunity to cheat and to pilfer. And kits and cubs, and my personal experience on this planet, those who are not capable of imagining a reality in which someone is not looking to do that, despite all that they have accomplished in their lives, are people who can't imagine themselves not doing that. Every accusation is a confession. Conservatives believe that because they, if they had the opportunity, would use it to enrich themselves personally, that it is literally impossible that any other human being would not. And that's a scary thought. When you yourself are corrupt and are ready to lie and defame and cheat and misrepresent and disinform at the drop of a hat, so therefore you cannot imagine a reality in which others wouldn't either, because you got to get them before they get you. This mentality of constant siege is exhausting. It's exhausting. All right. Moving on to other things, kits and cubs. yesterday, it seems that we were somewhat prescient. We talked about, with regard to trade and tariffs, what if the situation was that there is no possible trade deal with Donald Trump? What then? What do we do then? And, we got into that a little bit, noting that the prime minister was going to have a meeting with cabinet, and I think it was cabinet, if not all of caucus, um, about the way forward on trade. And then some interesting things happened because there was a shift in tone that started with regard to that. Um, I didn't expect to hear anything of the sort yesterday, to be totally honest. But it seems that Team Canada and the Prime Minister have indeed come to the conclusion, not that we have, that no trade deal is actually possible with Donald Trump, but very specifically that no trade deal that has tariffs completely lifted is possible with Donald Trump. Now, this does create a bit of a problem for the Prime Minister and Team Canada in that throughout the campaign and since, even as recently as a few weeks ago, because we heard from the ambassador of Canada to the United States as well, stating the same thing, that the goal was for a more comprehensive agreement on economics, but also on defense, because we're talking about 5% of spending of GDP for NATO, and Trump was talking a lot about that golden dome. We haven't heard a lot about it in the last few weeks, but with those two things, it's kind of obligated us to go that route. Now, the prime minister, Trump was looking for specifically trade deals. Canada was trying to go for a slightly more comprehensive thing prior to the scheduled renegotiation of NAFTA 2 or CUSMA for 2026 to try and settle as many things as possible so that we can have some stability and some predictability and not have to be lobbing a different trade tariff threat every 2 or 3 weeks. The concept of a deal that is going to be tariff-free, at least, if not the concept that a deal is possible at all, is now the question at hand. And it seems that Team Canada and the Prime Minister have come to the conclusion, as have many other people as well, that a tariff-free deal is not going to be possible. Now, this is not necessarily a surprise because Trump has telegraphed right from the beginning that there's tariff, there's absolutely going to be tariff. And with his Liberation Day, when he tackled himself a bit later, it seemed that the clear indication is that everybody at a minimum is going to have at least 10%. The price that everybody has to pay for the privilege of doing business with the United States, because the United States is so great and so exceptional, is that you're all going to have to pay 10% tariffs. This, while we get tariff-free access and increased access to your markets. But if you want any access to ours at all, your products are going to have to suffer a 10% minimum tariff. And Trump thinks that that's a great deal for everyone, because just getting to do business in the United States requires some membership fee or entry fee or basic premium or tribute to the country. Yeah, I know. It's a dumb way to do business. It's a dumb way to do business because it's essentially imposing a 10% sales tax on everything, 10% GST or value-added tax. Now, could the United States do with a value-added tax? Probably. And probably they just should have imposed a sales tax, but of course that probably would not have gone over very well because the United States, especially Republicans, don't like to tax people, or at least they don't like to admit that they're taxing people, right? Because taxes are a dirty word. But the United States does have a revenue problem at the moment, and has a bigger one now that the big, whatever, beautiful, bold, bad, whatever bill has passed, because now he has to raise X number of $1 trillion in order to feed the already obscenely wealthy, that tax cut. So, yes, he's taken away food stamps or SNAP benefits, he's taken away Medicaid, and then charging these tariffs, which American consumers are paying, and raising that money, that $106 billion that Peter Navarro is bragging about. But he's not redistributing that money to the people who needs it. That's money he needs to fund that tax cut for the ultra wealthy. So, unlike Canada, which the plan is to take that tariff money for counter tariffs that we charge and to reinvest that in people and in those industries to build them, Donald Trump is not doing that. Right? That money that he's taken is just going to go directly into the pockets of those who need it least at the moment. So he's basically forcing Americans to subsidize the rich. This is one of the greatest transfers of wealth from the bottom up. Right? It's no longer trickle down. It's trickle up economy in the United States that he is establishing. So none of that money is going to help workers. None of that money is going to help affected industries in the United States. None of that is going to be invested to help to get the United States a leg up. Unlike here, which also, if we're going to be able to buy enough time, will help us close whatever gap or shore up whatever defenses economically that we need to do to handle whatever Trump has got planned, whatever else Trump has got planned for us. The other thing, however, that we also know is that whether it's trade surplus or trade deficit doesn't really seem to matter, because as we discussed yesterday with Brazil, the United States has a trade surplus with it, but it doesn't stop them from slapping a 50% tariff on them for reasons that have nothing to do with economics. But also the alleged deal they signed with the UK, which was the first one, in which Trump didn't seem to have a problem with the digital service tax then. For everything that was negotiated on that, and I don't know if that one's even signed yet either, or anything's on paper yet, or that's still a handshake deal, the UK still had a 10% tariff, generalized tariff slapped on it. So there is no indication anywhere with any partner, any nation, anywhere in the world that there is going to be a deal that can be had that will be tariff-free. Nobody has managed to achieve it yet. At all. Not even close. So yesterday, going into the meeting, the Prime Minister was asked a question, and it seems that language has already shifted. You know, he said this in French when asked, but basically he stated, quote, "There's not a lot of evidence right now that a tariff deal with the United States is an option. Nobody's managed to do it, and he's not making any headway." So, opposition parties and media are going to be quick to brand this and brand an admission of the non-existence of a tariff-free option as some type of failure on the part of Prime Minister Carney and his government, rather than something that stems from either an inherent character flaw with the President of the United States, or just the fact that this is a reality that is being imposed on us. And we don't. You can only control what you can control, and if someone's determined to slap a tariff on you, no, you can coax, you can cajole, you can sweet talk, you can, present all the logical and rational arguments you do. If someone's hell bent on doing it, they're going to do it. right? At this point, after that, you get to threats to try and encourage or coerce someone to not do it. And when it comes to threatening, I mean, we have some leverage and there are things that we can do, but we have to be realistic about the relative sizes of our economies. A lot more can be done to us if this starts to get a little snitty or petty than we can do to them. Now, if that's a cost we're willing to take, we can do that, but I think we would like, given everything else that we have to do in terms of reorienting our economy and changing, diversifying our trade partners and all the infrastructure that we need to build in order to complete the turn towards Europe and maybe make a bigger turn towards other nations in Asia. Our foreign affairs minister, I believe, Anita Anand, was recently at a meeting with the ASEAN nations to try and open those types of doors in the same way that we're opening doors to the EU and establishing those types of linkages. If we're going to be establishing these other types of mechanisms, there needs some time to onboard them, to reorient, to make sure that we have the materials and the contracts written and all that kind of stuff. There is some lag time there. Yes. And in that lag time is where a lot of damage can be done to us. And that's why there is an imperative that we do things quickly when we're talking about C5 and all those types of things, that things are done quickly, but they have to be done. Even though that we have to move with purpose and alacrity, we still can't skip steps. But there is a very core reason we're not moving fast just because we want to move fast or just for shits and giggles. We're moving fast because we may be at a moment where all we're doing on one end is trying to buy ourselves enough time to get all these other things set up and running before the guy south of us decides that he's losing patience with us and decides to do his worst. Now, even if he does his worst, we will survive it. But there's going to be a lot more pain and it's going to be a lot harder and there's going to be a lot more sniping from the sidelines than if we're able to manage that process in some way. Now, we have Pierre Poilievre, who already gleefully is making statements such as, another unilateral concession from a man who said he would never back down to the US president. One, as if Pierre himself could have done better with far lesser skills. And two, well, what else can you expect from Pierre? Right? The fact that no tariff-free trade deal is possible or is not a reality or is not obtainable is because the prime minister somehow failed, not because the guy on the other end is completely rigid and unyielding, which is actually kind of ironic because if there's anybody in Canadian politics that should have a deep and profound expertise in all matters related to being relentless and unyielding, it would be Pierre Poilievre. But we digressed. And as we mentioned on our previous show, I don't know how well Pierre's efforts to try to make the prime minister wear this or turn this into a character flaw of the prime minister will hold or will stick among people that are not his base already, because Canadians have had plenty of time to watch Donald Trump in action, and they know that he is the equivalent of human jello. And everybody knows how hard it is to nail jello to a wall. So we keep on seeing the images that Canadians keep on seeing as the prime minister keep on showing up, going to meetings, as not retaliating in ways that would give us 5 seconds of catharsis. Yeah, he really showed him this, and then we duck and cover for what's to come. As Donald Trump decides to throw a haymaker that's 10 times as hard because we either embarrassed him or humiliated him or anything. Right? A lot of people would love to see that. Listen, I would love to see it. I would love to see the prime minister when Donald Trump is just yammering on, just to turn up. Will you just fucking shut up, you dumbass? Right? We're going to hit you with 35% tariffs now. Okay, fine. Boom. We're taxing your oil and we're calling your debt. Fuck you. I'd love to see that. I really would. But again, couple of minutes of catharsis. And then what? Elbows up doesn't necessarily mean elbows to the face every single damn time an opportunity presents itself. Elbows up can just be defending your space at some point. So it's not that unfathomable that Canadians turn up and say, well, that's dealing with Trump. Carney gave it his best shot, but that's what dealing with Trump is like. And that might be the extent of it. We also have to realize that because the Mango Mussolini is only about 14% through his second term, there's likely a whole lot more messiness that can come our way. So repeatedly sticking our elbow right into Donald Trump's nose. Strategically, if we were going to do that at some point, 14% into his mandate probably isn't the right time, because that gives him way too much time to retaliate. So we're going to have to do some things, and this is what we might be reduced to, because reality is as reality is, and there are certain things about reality that we cannot alter. We might just be reduced, for lack of a better word, to marking time and minimizing, and then trying to move as fast as we can on our end with all the other things that we're doing to try and shore up our economic positions and economic defenses. Now, another thing that Prime Minister Carney said, which seems to give the impression that we might be moving in this direction, quote, "Government has consistently stood up for Canadian workers and businesses throughout these negotiations. We will continue to do so. I expect that the discussions will intensify between now and the end of the month, and we'll be working hard on that. At the same time, we need to recognize that the commercial landscape globally has changed. It's changed in a fundamental manner, and we will continue to focus on what we can most control, which is building a strong Canadian economy." The work of tempering Canadians' expectations for a tariff-free deal as being the destination has already started. Again, we need to recognize that the commercial landscape globally has changed in a fundamental manner. We will continue to focus on what we can most control. Read between the lines. Donald Trump cannot be controlled. So we're going to start focusing our attentions on other things. That doesn't mean we cut off trade negotiations. That means is that we establish a team that will mollycoddle and placate and all the other things that we have to do when somebody seems hell-bent on trying to make our lives miserable, to try to delay the onset, try to reduce the impact of that as much as possible, for as long as possible, while we get on with doing the work of making sure that we still have a strong economy. It's a delicate balancing act, particularly with someone who can just wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day and say, you know what, here, pharmaceuticals, 200% tariffs. But that's the storm we're living in. Hurricane Donald is going to do what it does. And we're like putting plywood over the windows and sandbagging our houses for rising water and all of that type of stuff, while trying to do whatever we can to make sure that we can still trade with other partners and make up for some of the losses. Mélanie Joly, Canada's industry minister, layered on top of that impression when she said coming out of the meeting, so those first two quotes from Prime Minister Carney were going into the meeting, but coming out of the meeting, quote, "We had a very good and thorough conversation with the Prime Minister and different ministers who are working on the Canada-US relations. Of course, I've said it many times, we won't negotiate in public, but the goal is to make sure at the end of the day we are protecting Canadian workers and we are making sure that Canada's interests and Canadian interests are protected." So the verbiage has started to shift somewhat here in some pretty marked and noticeable ways in order to start the job of bringing Canadians along to the realization that the originally stated goal, a tariff-free trade deal, is not on the table because our interlocutor on the other side of it is making that impossible. Not because we failed, but because someone has decided unyieldingly that it is going to be so. And therefore, we can either pretend that this is not our new reality and still try to fight and waste time, energy, effort, and all other resources on a deal that is not attainable, or we accept reality as it is and not reality as we would like it to be, and we move forward from there. And it seems that right now we are in the latter position, and it seems that the Prime Minister recognizes this and has started changing the rhetoric and the public position in order to hopefully, subtly, and deftly bring Canadians along with him on that path. So that whenever we do get something of some kind finalized somewhere, and even that's not a given, that hopefully it will stick. At least for a while. Now, when it comes to making those changes, by the way, before I move to the segue out, when it comes to all of that kind of stuff, Prime Minister Carney, it seems that today in particular, aluminium and steel are going to be a big focus because Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to unveil the next steps in his government's ongoing efforts to support Canada's steel sector during a morning visit to an unnamed steel manufacturing company in Hamilton. So there'll probably be some live press event around 11:30 for that if you're following that and want to watch it on CPAC. And as per his itinerary, Carney will tour the facility and meet with workers ahead of the on-camera announcement, which, according to the notice, will include a back and forth with reporters. So hopefully there will also be some announcements with regards to supports for workers coming in that, hopefully. And it seems that aluminium and steel is a theme of the day because Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu is also booked for a midday appearance at Algoma Steel alongside local Liberal Terry Sheehan, and that will be at 12:30 there. And there's a lot of other articles out there, I think, and I don't think I will have time to read them into the record today for you, but I think our exports and steel have already gone down 30%, and that was with the 25% tariff working its way through. Now that there's a 50% tariff, that's going to hit even harder. So there is a reason specifically why these two industries are probably getting attention today. But there is another element here. If we're going to move with alacrity to get these projects of national interest built, we have to do it in a way that, how would I put it? I think they call it participative management, where it takes a little longer to make the decision because you're consulting more broadly and more widely and more intently. But once the decision is made, it's faster to implement because everybody has had their say and everybody has bought in to the decision. That step, when it comes to Indigenous peoples, appears to have been skipped when it comes to Bill 5 in Ontario and Bill C5 federally. And there are consequences that are starting to appear. According to the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network, APTN, this is Mark Blackburn, 9 First Nations are challenging the federal and provincial project laws in court. 9 First Nations in Ontario are launching legal action to try and stop 2 pieces of legislation they say threaten the right to self-determination, the environment, and fundamental human freedoms. Both of the 5s, Bill C5 and Bill 5, were introduced to push forward massive economic developments without the necessary information to understand and address what could be serious negative impacts, and without including First Nations whose lands these projects would be built on and take up in much of. That's a difficult sentence structure here. Let me try that again. Hey. Both of the 5s, Bill C5 and Bill 5, were introduced to push forward massive economic developments without the necessary information to understand and address what could be serious negative impacts, and without including First Nations, whose lands these projects would be built on and take up, in much of any of the decision-making process. Quote, the waiver of protective rules and the ignoring of First Nations rights means that these bills are unconstitutional and must be struck down, said the nations in a statement released on Tuesday. The nations involved are Alderville, Apitipi, Asinikapek, Aroland, Attawapiskat, Fort Albany, Ganunkaming, Kitchenumekusib, Ininuig, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Wabaskang First Nation. Quote, these laws authorize the Crown governments to approve on a fast track major projects like Ring of Fire mining and pipelines by short-circuiting the need to get critical information about human and environmental safety and impacts without involving the very peoples whose lands these projects would eat up, said Taynar Simpson, chief of the Alderville First Nation. Quote, our case is not a fight against development, it's a fight against dangerous development pushed ahead by factless, thoughtless, and reckless decision-making from government ministers behind closed doors with little accountability. Bill C5, the One Economy Act passed by the federal government, allows the cabinet to quickly grant federal approvals for big industrial projects like mines, ports, and pipelines by sidestepping existing laws. Approvals will be done behind closed doors and decisions will not be debated in Parliament. In Ontario, the government of Doug Ford passed Bill 5, which will allow the province to create, quote, special economic zones and bypass several pieces of environmental and municipal legislation. Neither Canada nor Ontario consulted with First Nations ahead of passing the 2 laws. Quote, we First Nations are not against development per se. This is not about a battle between development and not, said Chief Todd Cornelius from the Oneida Nation of the Thames. It's about doing things recklessly and doing things right. Both Carney and Ford are blaming tariffs levied by U.S. President Donald Trump as the reason for these laws. Leaders say the on and off negotiations over a new trade deal have made developing national projects a necessity. Quote, panicking over the short term is not a reason to sacrifice the very values Canada says it holds dear and the long-term viability of the lands and people, said Chief Sherry Taylor of the Kanukaming First Nation in the statement. If Canada and Ontario are so worried about threats to Canada from a bullying U.S. president whose administration has been stripping human rights protections, then why are Canada and Ontario supposedly answering those threats with their own laws that bully First Nations and strip human rights and environmental protections here? Would that not make this country the very thing we are trying to avoid being imposed on us? That's a very, very damn good question. The lawsuit comes as Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to host a summit with First Nation leaders on Wednesday and Thursday to discuss the details of Bill C5. More to come on that. Guess we'll definitely be talking about that tomorrow. But yes, Kits and Cubs, the first legislative pothole in which the push to diversify ourselves and to build up those defenses and to buy that time is now officially underway because not enough time was taken at the onset to ensure that that buy-in was obtained before moving forward. So now there's a court case. And that court case can only help but delay. So if we need to move fast, these meetings that will be taking place need to make a lot of progress. And the meetings that are taking place are only going to deal with things related to Bill C5. With regard to Bill 5 in Ontario, there's not going to be much hope for that because Doug Ford, as we mentioned on the show, made some very, very unflattering statements and stereotypical statements about First Nations communities coming to him cap in hand while not wanting to approve development deals, for which he allegedly apologized sincerely, but then a couple of weeks later had his Minister of the Environment, Todd McCarthy, send out a letter, which I do not believe there's any way that letter went out without full approval from the Premier and the Premier's office itself, wondering whether or not, well, demanding that the federal government not pass safe drinking water legislation because, well, ensuring that First Nations actually have potable drinking water and access to fresh waterways would hurt their ability to do development, which of course makes me say if you can't do development without hurting potable drinking water and fresh waterways, maybe you should step down from your job in favor of someone who actually has the ability to achieve that. And that so offended, at least in Ontario, that First Nations are now demanding the resignation of the Environment Minister. So, again, not sure how we develop the Ring of Fire, not sure how we get those pipelines, not sure how we do that mining. If we keep on establishing the ground rules by how we're going to do that without including the people that will be most affected. Legislation kills projects. It's one of the main reasons Harper and Conservatives were not able to lay an inch of pipe towards Tidewater, because the Supreme Court told them, you didn't do proper consultation. Here are the things that you need to do for proper consultation to have taken place. And Prime Minister Harper at the time, rather than just saying, you know what, okay, fine, we'll do the proper consultation, which is what Prime Minister Trudeau did, and then TMX did eventually get built, Prime Minister Harper decided to go on a crusade against activist judges and fundraise off the idea of building a pipeline, but never actually taking any steps to build one. So he basically fleeced the nation for the better part of a decade, promising something that he really had no intent of delivering because he wouldn't follow the procedure. If there's a procedure to follow and you decide that you're going to attempt to make a big project like this without following procedure, don't be surprised if you fail. You're setting yourself up to fail. You're tying your shoelaces together and then say, hey, let's go run a marathon at sprint speed. It's not going to happen. So you got to do the right thing, but you got to do the right thing in the right way. It's not just what you want to do. It's not just about the destination. How you get there also matters. And if you're not willing to get there in a way that is decent and respectable, and that adheres and complies with the law and the Constitution, you're not getting there. First Nations will not allow it. So, at least at the federal level, because I don't have much hope for Doug Ford, there are some things that are going to have to change and change pretty quickly if they want First Nations to drop the federal part of this litigation. Because litigation, listen, if they want these approved within 2 years and shovels in the ground, this litigation is going to take more than 2 years. Clearly. So there are some decisions that are going to have to be made. First Nations are not just a checkbox on a list. We held a meeting for one day, we consulted. It has to be meaningful consultation. It has to be participative management. They have to be brought in from the ground floor. If you're not prepared to do that, you don't want projects. You might say you do, but you don't want them because you're not prepared to follow the process to make sure they happen. So, personally, I say good. Good for the First Nations. They're doing the right thing. They are on the right side of this. Hopefully, the Prime Minister is able to see the light on this, like he has seen the light with regard to there being no possibility of there being a tariff-free trade deal in a world in which Donald Trump is on the other side of the table. Jeez. Before we go, one little other moment of conservatives doing something not that great. It seems that everybody's been talking about Jenny Byrne since the loss of Pierre Poilievre in the election, not only losing the election, but losing his seat. And while he's trying to brag about having the shiniest silver medal in history and trying to blame everybody else and everything else, like the public servants and the unions organized against him for the problems that he's got internally and even externally, a lot of people are just looking at, yeah, but Jenny. What about Jenny? Because, well, let's put it this way. If we go back to June 18th, Evan Scrimshaw had a couple of words to say about Jenny Byrne, and I tend to agree with him here. But he starts, Jenny Byrne is by every objective metric very bad at her job. She failed to get Pierre Poilievre elected prime minister. She failed to cost Mark Carney seats, and she failed to stop Trudeau the one time she got to run a campaign against him. She is bad at this. She's also clearly an asshole, as her appearances on The Curse of Politics all throughout the 2021 campaign proved. She had no problem eviscerating Aaron O'Toole for failings of his campaign, showing a level of disloyalty she and people close to her would complain about 3 years later from Corey Tenike. But she didn't care then. I could write a whole piece about that, though I must confess I just don't care to. What angers me is that she's so catastrophically idiotic, even as she is comically wounded, posting the photo of Carney with McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman from when he skated with the team as some sort of dunk after the Oilers lost Game 7, the Stanley Cup. Or Game 6 it was, sorry, can't remember off the top of my head here. It's senselessly petty, vindictive, but it also encapsulates so much of what's wrong with modern conservatism. And then he goes on and says, but the honest truth about Byrne is that she views nothing as sacred. Nothing is beyond the realm of partisan fighting and shit throwing. Nothing is too much or too pure or just plain ineffective. It's all mud all the time. And it's the reason that Poilievre lost the election in a miniature, less important box. So, with regard to that, and before people get all up in arms that Evan Scrimshaw would call Jenny Byrne an asshole, he also says, but being an asshole for the sake of it isn't robustness. It's being an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. As someone who is wildly an asshole, I know the difference. So he admits he himself is an asshole here. We love to dress up our actions as some form of strategic maneuver, but it's just plain dickishness. And the honest answer is that Canadians right now want a constructive politics, not a nasty party. So Canadians don't want a nasty party. Well, unfortunately, in the Globe and Mail, Stephanie Levitz writes, Jenny Byrne, the campaign director who many blame for the Conservatives' loss in the spring election, will continue to play a role in the party, but sources say she is stepping away from the daily grind on Parliament Hill. Ms. Byrne did not personally return a request for comment from the Globe and Mail on Tuesday, but party spokesperson Sarah Fisher said Ms. Byrne remains involved. Quote, Jenny Byrne is still an advisor to the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre. But two sources told the Globe that she's scaling back her connection to the party's work in opposition. The Globe is not naming the sources as they were not authorized by the party to discuss internal human resources issues. Word that Ms. Byrne has been forced out spread throughout Ottawa political circles Tuesday, the latest round of speculation on whether leader Pierre Poilievre will make any changes to how his party does business after an election campaign that returned yet another Liberal minority government. Ms. Byrne and Mr. Poilievre have personal and professional relationship that goes back decades. She is sometimes referred to as the most powerful woman in Conservative politics, as she played a significant role in the previous Conservative government led by Stephen Harper. Ms. Byrne ran Mr. Poilievre's party leadership race in 2022. In the years after that victory, she was a near constant presence on Parliament Hill, though she never had a formal title. She was involved in daily calls and meetings and helped direct strategy and messaging, even as she was also running her own lobbying firm, Jenny Byrne and Associates, out of Toronto. Toward the end of 2024, it seemed that the Conservatives would form government in the next election, and speculation then was whether Ms. Byrne would become Mr. Poilievre's chief of staff or continue with her firm. But the election of U.S. President Donald Trump changed the political landscape. Mr. Poilievre and Ms. Byrne struggled to recalibrate their party's narrative to account for the surge of Canadian nationalism amid the trade disputes with the U.S. So though on April 28th the party won more seats and more votes than it had in 2021, it still failed to defeat the Liberals. To some within the party, that is Ms. Byrne's fault, and the fact that Mr. Poilievre lost his own seat is held up as evidence of her failure. Others lay more blame on him and point to Prime Minister Carney's adoption of some Conservative pledges as evidence that their policy offerings weren't the issue, but their leader was. Mr. Poilievre is now running a by-election for the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot. No formal postmortem of the party's election campaign has been announced, but Mr. Poilievre's leadership will be up for a review by the grassroots at a convention scheduled for January. He has been asked outright in the past whether he'd fire Ms. Byrne and has supported her. On Monday, he was asked whether anything was going to change about how he runs the party. In his answer, he referred to the fact that the Conservatives won 41% of the popular vote. It's a number that used to be enough to form government. The Liberals won in 2021 with just 32% of the vote. The collapse of support for the NDP, however, saw the Liberals garner nearly 44%. Quote, 41% might not be enough in the future, so we have to ask, how can we expand even beyond that number and reach even more Canadians with our message? Mr. Poilievre told reporters after an unrelated announcement. We need to present ourselves as a government in waiting. Well, they're not doing that at all, because we just saw Rachel Harder lie about inflation numbers, and yesterday we saw Michelle Rempel-Garner behaving really stupidly, blaming the measles outbreak in Alberta on the fact that Trudeau allegedly downplayed legitimate concerns about dangers that it could have been posed by the COVID vaccine, and that he politicized it. But I'm old enough to remember that if politicizing a vaccine is what caused the measles outbreak, Michelle Rempel-Garner herself was the first to politicize the COVID vaccine when she maintained that we wouldn't get it until 2035, when we started getting some shipments, but the factory in Belgium had to retool to increase capacity. But that was back when Michelle Rempel-Garner thought that she was too cute to die young and really, really wanted the vaccine. But now that she's got hers, well, it's all fuck all y'all time again. This is not the behavior of a government in waiting. Just saying. All right, kids and cups. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us, because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us. And if you share our content with a little word of yours, well, hey, that makes us very happy, because you are influencers in your own circle. Now, if you do not want to miss an episode, you don't have to, thanks to the Ray Girl, who has sponsored our pod page. And if you scan that QR code that just appeared on the screen, it will take you there. And if you're listening, you go to podpage.com/thetruenortheagerbeaver with a hyphen between each one of those words. And when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it comes directly to you. You don't even have to go looking for it. And if you do listen to us on podcast and can give us some stars and reviews, that helps us with the algorithm. If you're looking to help us with the algorithm in other ways, well, then surfing on down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, where kids Elaine and Cassie beckon you to smash with our buttons, like, share, and subscribe. Give them a little click. Makes us happy when you do. And it helps us with the algorithm. And if you would like to help us in other ways, well, we do incur some costs to bring this show to you, and we would be very grateful for your assistance with them. And if you would like to do that, a donation to the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund, because a moist beaver is always a happy beaver, as Kit Saucy would like to say. as I moisten myself right now. There you go. Is always greatly appreciated. So if you scan that QR code that just appeared on our screen or go to our coffee page, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, we would love to hear the sound of a little bit of coinage hitting the bottom of that jar. It makes us very happy. And we thank you for, as always, for your enthusiastic expressions of encouragement. Kids and Cubs, because democracy is something that you do. Again, mypcalberta.ca, mypcalberta.ca, the website where you can go to if you live in Alberta to try and make sure that they get the at least about 9,000 signatures they need to register the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta with Elections Canada so that you have more options. Very important. And also remember, Kids and Cubs, if you would like to support Bonnie Critchley and you haven't made your maximum political donation during the last election, you have some contribution room. Bonnie Critchley could definitely use your help because, again, in a riding of 51,000 square kilometers, a little gas money goes a long, long, long way. So if you are able to help, that would be absolutely fantastic. And you can do that, Kids and Cubs, by sending a donation to donations@bonniecritchleyindependent.com. Bonnie Critchley Independent, all in one word. And please, every cent counts. This is how you can do democracy. Well, words of wisdom, Kids and Cubs. Listen, you're going to hear a lot of narrative coming from the Conservatives over the next few days because always double check, right? I was in a discussion with someone and I said, do you have proof? And he says, well, Pierre Poilievre said it. Pierre Poilievre saying it is not proof. Well, many other people have said it too. Many other people saying it is not proof, right? Make sure that if you're hearing something and it sounds just a little too inflammatory, because that you probably cross-reference it with other sources, verifiable, independent, and reliable to make sure that it is true. Okay? Because the zone is about to be flooded with BS, both on Carney's conflict of interests and both on a deal with Trump specifically. And probably a lot with regard to what First Nations are trying to do as well. Because if there's one thing conservatives love to do is lie about First Nations. So just let's be clear on that. So make sure that you take the time to to verify before you decide to get mad. Okay. Kids and Cubs, it could be a tough world out there. So please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And now, at the count of 3, may I please have everybody in unison say, Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock. 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes. Yes. Very well done. Didn't hear a stray voice at all in there. I must oblige. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. Before we go very quickly, just a shout out to Canada's women's under 19 basketball team playing at the World Championships. They got out of the main round pool play and had advanced to the playoffs and had their first playoff match against South Korea, defeating them 70-58 to advance to the next round. So let's hope for some good things for them. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.